Still with Seo Joo-Heon and his subordinates who were in the same tomb as Seo Joo-Heon, they even brought hunters in their team. Hunters are someone who plays more of a role in combat than tomb excavation, and that's why they all have good weapons. But on the side of Seo Joo-Heon, it seemed that he didn't have much preparation when he came here because some of the relics hadn't been repaired. Seo Joo-Heon also considered all of them who hadn't had time to rest, so he would avoid fighting as much as possible. Seo Joo-Heon guided them deeper into the tomb. There were statues of ancient Egyptian guards with torches on both sides of the entrance. Seo Joo-Heon and his team reached the room and they saw a chest in front of it. Several statues that looked like ancient Egyptian guards stood all over the room. Seo Joo-Heon warned them that a battle was about to take place in this room. As they were now in a trapped room at that moment, an earthquake began to shake under their feet. And the statues that had been silent now shouted angrily at all of them who disturbed the pharaoh's peace. Seo Joo-Heon mocked Yoo-Ji-ha, who was very easily surprised when he found something like that in front of his eyes. Seo Joo-Heon said that the trap this time was very simple for Seo Joo-Heon, where they only needed to defeat the statue, but it seemed that the trap this time was not that simple in the eyes of others. Seo Joo-Heon prepared to attack when he saw the statue also prepared to attack him. After the statue began to attack, it was seen Yoo-Ji-ha, who tried to avoid all the attacks. Meanwhile, Seo Joo-Heon moved to attack the statue, and with one slash the statue was split by Seo Joo-Heon. Louis looked shocked as he saw a chunk of the statue's head fall in front of his eyes. Meanwhile, the rope relic moved and tied back Louis' body to keep him from running away. Yoo-Ji-ha, who was not focused, was almost hit, but fortunately he was saved by Seo Joo-Heon. After all the statues in the room were defeated, smoke and dust soared and filled the room. Seo Joo-Heon smiled happily because he was able to defeat all the statues. They had all regrouped when everything was destroyed. As Seo Joo-Heon said that this was just a simple and easy trap, Seo Joo-Heon also said that this was a shortcut. Seo Joo-Heon guided them through the shortcut to a room. Yoo-Ji-ha, who asked, saw Seo Joo-Heon pointing to someone at the end of the path. They were surprised to see Irene standing there. Meanwhile, Irene was very happy when she saw Seo Joo-Heon, and it seemed that the path they took was the path to meet Irene, who looked lost. Irene complained to Seo Joo-Heon about what happened to her and made her trapped in this tomb. Yoo-Ji-ha agreed with Irene because that's what they felt before entering this tomb. Seo Joo-Heon seemed to use his torch to read the tomb glyphs on the wall of the tomb to look for information. Yoo-Ji-ha seemed curious about the relic inside the tomb. Seo Joo-Heon seemed to be unsure because what he read in the tomb glyphs seemed strange. There were too many things to read there, and he also believed he had received a news that they had entered the Valley of the Kings. Valley of the Kings is a burial place for the bodies of the pharaohs who ruled Egypt in ancient times. The famous place for burying the bodies of pharaohs is the pyramid, which was made during the reign of ancient Egypt, but because it was prone to being stolen, the pharaoh of the New Kingdom made this place and eventually became a trap. Seo still doesn't understand what Seo Joo-Heon means. Seo Joo-Heon explains that there are several relics contained in this tomb, but that's not too surprising since other tombs also have more than one relic. But this time, the number of relics is not just one or two, but very much, and that makes Seo Joo-Heon sure if the Pentagon's relic is also buried in this tomb. After hearing all this information, they were happy because they could get so many relics in this tomb, but unfortunately, because of too much information that could be obtained, Seo Joo-Heon did not know which relic owned this tomb. Seo Joo-Heon then continued his journey, and as they walked and walked, when they came to a corner, they met American soldiers. The soldiers seemed surprised and prepared to attack Seo Joo-Heon. But Seo Joo-Heon did not want a battle to occur, and he claimed that he was just part of the excavation team. Seo Joo-Heon praised the soldier who was holding a relic in his hand. The soldier confirmed that they were from America, and they also said that only American soldiers were given permission to loot this tomb. The soldiers tried to prevent Seo Joo-Heon from coming with them. Seo Joo-Heon then mentioned about the American soldiers who said they welcomed excavation teams from other countries, and Seo Joo-Heon also reasoned that she was here to meet with their president. The soldier then mentioned that the name Seo Joo-Heon was not on the list of excavation teams allowed to enter the tomb. Seo Joo-Heon whispered and asked Irene for help. Seo Joo-Heon continued to say if Irene was only allowed to release a little of her strength, and Irene, who understood, agreed. Immediately the soldiers shouted Irene had used her strength to attack the American soldiers. After receiving an attack from Irene, they all encountered strange symptoms that occurred in their bodies. Seo Joo-Heon looked at Irene and asked her to be a little lighter in using her power. After that, some notification windows appeared and said that now the tomb's power synergized with Irene's power and formed a curse. Seo Joo-Heon was confused at first, but after he managed to realize what it meant, Seo Joo-Heon asked his team to run now. But as they ran, they were hit by the curse. Instantly, Yoo Ji-ha experienced aging on his body, and on the contrary, Seo-Ah regressed where she was now a little girl. As Seo Joo-Heon looked back, the situation was chaotic, where Yoo Ji-ha had turned into an elderly while Seo-Ah and Irene turned into little girls. Seo Joo-Heon was confused now with what happened. Seo-Ah felt that she turned back into a little girl again together with Irene. Seo Joo-Heon seemed confused by all this. Meanwhile, Yoo Ji-ha seemed unacceptable when he became an elderly. Yoo Ji-ha also unacceptable when he saw Seo Joo-Heon was fine. Seo Joo-Heon was sure that what made him unchanged was because of the immunity he had, but he didn't have time to explain it all. Yoo Ji-ha was also unacceptable when he saw Louis, who was fine. Seo Joo-Heon was thinking of ways how they could get out of all this mess. But before starting his journey, Seo Joo-Heon checks their condition if anyone is injured. It seems that Irene and Seo-Ah can still do everything as usual. With this attack, Seo Joo-Heon can determine what relic is the owner of this tomb. The attack they received was called the Curse of the Pharaoh, and because this entire tomb had curse energy in it, made Irene's strength increase. After knowing the clues given by this tomb, Seo Joo-Heon was sure that the owner of this tomb was the relic Tutankhamun. The name seemed familiar to them, although all the pharaohs of the New Kingdom built the Valley of the Kings to prevent theft, but still their corpses were stolen. But there was only one tomb left, and that was the tomb of Tutankhamun. There used to be some valuable items buried in the tomb, and it attracted the attention of the world community. But there was a terrible rumor circulating that said if anyone dug up Tutankhamun's grave, then that person would be cursed to death. Although someone named Cannabon died while in this tomb, but Cannabon died because of his health. But Cannabon died because of his poor health, but people spread rumors that Cannabon died because he was cursed. And finally, the rumor spread quickly, and they all believed that the tomb was cursed. And because the relic was born from such a story, it was certain that the relic had the power to curse someone. Yoo Ji-ha seemed doubtful if they would succeed in defeating the relic, but Seo Joo-Heon was sure that it would not be a problem as long as they managed to reach the relic room. The problem was that they didn't know if they would be hit by another curse attack as they moved to find the relic room, and with that Seo Joo-Heon had a plan to not use the relic and move silently. And with that Seo Joo-Heon again guided them while looking for a way to avoid other excavation teams and trapped rooms. This plan seemed to be working well as they were able to avoid the traps with the help of the tomb glyphs. But the situation now did not favor them to move slowly as Seo Joo-Heon needed to return his friends to their original form as soon as possible. But their steps stopped. They had come to a passage formed vertically downward that was used to stop thieves in ancient times. Seo Joo-Heon could not be sure how deep the hole was because it was made with relics. Seo Joo-Heon intended to go to the other side where there was another passage on the other side, and he asked the rope relic to move them one by one to avoid the possibility that they would be caught by this relic tomb. Seo Joo-Heon asked the rope relic to tie him up and move him to the other side of the passage. Seo Joo-Heon told the rope relic to use as little energy as possible. The rope relic slowly moved the body of Seo Joo-Heon by taking it flying to the other side of the hallway. Seo Joo-Heon didn't expect that his plan this time would work well, after his feet touched the other side of the hallway. And after that, the rope relic was asked to carry Seo Ah and Irene. Since they were both small children, the rope relic shouldn't mind to carry the load. Louis saw this opportunity for himself to escape. Since the rope relic and Seo Joo-Heon were not nearby, he should be able to escape without having to think about being caught by the rope relic. Louis smiled as he saw this great opportunity. Louis planned to escape when Seo Ah and Irene were on the other side so that no one could catch them. And Louis would easily defeat Yoo-Ji-ha later because of Yoo-Ji-ha's aging body. After the rope relic was in midair carrying the two little girls, Louis did not waste the opportunity and used it to escape. Yoo-Ji-ha screamed and tried to chase Louis. While Seo Joo-Heon was confused by what was happening up there, Louis was happy because his plan this time was a great success and he managed to be free from being a prisoner of Seo Joo-Heon. But Yoo-Ji-ha's hand managed to reach Louis and hold him to escape, looking angry Yoo-Ji-ha while holding Louis' wrist. Louis tried to hit Yoo-Ji-ha, but Yoo-Ji-ha acted quickly by locking Louis' movements on the floor so that he could not escape. While they were fussing there, Seo Joo-Heon was still waiting for the two little girls to be signaled. Louis did not understand why Yoo-Ji-ha could move freely even when he turned into an elderly. Yoo-Ji-ha shouted to Seo Joo-Heon if he managed to secure Louis with him and asked for the rope relic to send them to his side. But Louis managed to kick Yoo-Ji-ha in the face. And now it seemed that Yoo-Ji-ha was about to fall into the bottomless pit because he was not ready to withstand Louis' attack. Slowly, Yoo-Ji-ha's body was pushed into the pit and Louis was able to balance himself and managed to save himself while Yoo-Ji-ha fell into the bottomless pit. Hearing Yoo-Ji-ha, who shouted Seo Joo-Heon quickly, ordered the rope relic to catch the body of Yoo-Ji-ha. But Seo Joo-Heon realized he had made a mistake when using the rope relic to reflexively help Yoo-Ji-ha, because the rope relic moved quickly and extended his body to save Yoo-Ji-ha. Seo Joo-Heon realized something: if now the relic of the tomb had managed to find the whereabouts of all of them. And with that, a new curse was received by all of them. Slowly, the body of Yoo-Ji-ha disappeared. Shortly after that, the body of Seo Ah also disappeared, followed by Irene. Seo Joo-Heon seemed confused now that they all disappeared. But Seo Joo-Heon had to be surprised when he also disappeared, and after that, everything disappeared without a trace. There was a moaning sound from Seo Joo-Heon, who could not see anything. Even now, her body could not move properly because the place was so narrow. Seo Joo-Heon tried to lift something that was holding her from above, but it didn't work. As a result, Seo Joo-Heon shouted for help, hoping that someone was around. Upon hearing the voice of his relic, Seo Joo-Heon became silent. He called his rope relic and was answered by the rope relic. The rope relic also said that he was near Seo Joo-Heon along with other relics. Seo Joo-Heon asked the rope relic for help to get himself out, who was trapped by something, but the relic seemed confused because he did not know what was trapping Seo Joo-Heon. The worm relic who was beside him scolded the rope relic who did not know about the coffin. Seo Joo-Heon was surprised when he found out that he was trapped in a coffin. And sure enough, now it looks like Seo Joo-Heon is trapped in a coffin that was used by ancient Egyptian pharaohs to store the body. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Irene and Seo were seen teleporting together in a hallway. They tried to analyze the place where they were. Seo realized that they were all separated intentionally by the relic. Although they seemed to be fine, but it seemed that they were in a place and they had to find the whereabouts of Seo Joo-Heon. Seo said that they had no choice but to use the relic, but Irene stopped her because of the possibility of another curse. Seo thought of using Gildal with the minimum energy possible. Seo was seen trying to get Gildal out by using her power as carefully as she could. Seo stretched out her hand, and from there a large plume of fire was seen, after which Gildal managed to get out. Seo seemed to be silent for a while and hoped that they would not be caught by the relic in this tomb, and heard Gildal who spoke to her. Irene was amazed by Seo's ability to take out the relic without getting them caught. Seo told Gildal to find Seo Joo-Heon and guide them to get there. But before Gildal departed, Seo warned him to suppress his power as little as possible so as not to get caught. Gildal understood what Seo said. After Gildal left, they just had to wait. Irene praised Seo's outstanding abilities, and she became happy when Seo Joo-Heon had a reliable partner like Seo. It made Irene relieved. Meanwhile, Seo, who was praised, became impressed, and became embarrassed when Irene praised her. Elsewhere, there was a crowd of people walking in the hallway of the tomb. It seemed that the people were part of the group Seo Kwon. And right above them was Yoo Ji-ha, who appeared from nothing and fell on one of the people there. Yoo Ji-ha felt a pain in his head as he fell. And when he opened his eyes, he saw the many guns pointed at him. Yoo Ji-ha looked panicked as he fell right in the middle of the TBM group. Looking Yoo Ji-ha, who was scared when one of the people there yelled at him. One of the other friends calmed down his angry friend because he thought Yoo Ji-ha was one of the locals who happened to be trapped in the tomb, but it seemed that one of them could realize that there was a relic on Yoo Ji-ha's body. The people from the TBM threatened Yoo Ji-ha to give all his relics, but Yoo Ji-ha said that all his relics were useless. The two men seemed to laugh when they saw Yoo Ji-ha was scared, and they planned to take the relic, but Yoo Ji-ha realized that they couldn't recognize him now, because it was impossible for them to let Yoo Ji-ha, who was part of the Seo Joo-Heon team, go. Yoo Ji-ha gave a pitiful look to the two people and was about to give them his relic, but Yoo Ji-ha said that his relic wasn't that useful because he collected them just for hobby, but before everything went well, someone came near him. Yoo Ji-ha could recognize this voice very well, and as he looked at the person who just came, Yoo Ji-ha was surprised when he saw Seo Kwon in front of his eyes. One of his subordinates there intending to take the relic from Yoo Ji-ha, without causing a mess like what Seo Kwon said before. Seo Kwon smiled when he saw the familiar face of the old man in front of him. Yoo Ji-ha looked frightened when Seo Kwon seemed to recognize him. And sure enough, Seo Kwon immediately called his name correctly, and everyone there was surprised to hear the name Yoo Ji-ha. His subordinates who did not recognize Yoo Ji-ha had turned into an elderly man, made Seo Kwon disappointed, but Yoo Ji-ha still tried to evade even though he had been completely caught. Seo Kwon just smiled at him and threatened Yoo Ji-ha if he would cut off his ears so that Yoo Ji-ha could hear well. His subordinates have restricted the movement of Yoo Ji-ha, but Yoo Ji-ha still refuses to admit that he is Yoo Ji-ha. He claims that he is just a carrier, but it seems that Seo Kwon does not believe it and uses his power now. After the power was channeled to Yoo Ji-ha, slowly his body changed to its original state, and the real Yoo Ji-ha was seen. He slightly regretted his desire to change to normal. while in front of him there were many subordinates of CEO Kwon who looked at him sharply. And with that, Yoo Ji-ha could only beg to be released by saying that he used goods made by TBM. But one of his subordinates there denied Yoo Ji-ha's statement and said that they had seen the Apple logo on the back of Yoo Ji-ha's cell phone. CEO Kwon smiled, and he told his subordinates to kill Yoo Ji-ha because by killing him then Lewis would be successfully obtained. But Yoo Ji-ha stopped those who tried to kill him. Yoo Ji-ha asked to be forgiven so that he could help them, and he promised to say the weakness of Seo Joo-Heon. Yoo Ji-ha in his heart apologized to Seo Joo-Heon because he used his name to stay alive. Yoo Ji-ha waited for a decision from CEO Kwon, and how relieved he was when CEO Kwon was willing to hear what he had to say. Will Yoo Ji-ha survive that way?